overall I feel all right. But there are guys out there that not necessarily like they did some kind of evil war crime or whatever, but they're like, what was it all for? You know, what was it all about?
Well, last summer, the scenes out of HKIA,
Yeah, tough.
really, really tough for anybody who served in that era. But you know, I think what I believe, and this is, you know, I'm not qualified to say this, but that never stopped me before anyway. But you know, violence in any form, it's like a toxin. And when you're around it and you're dealing with bodies and, you know, the awful things that happen to civilians and the things that our young men and women see, smell, hear, and then to expect them to be okay. I mean, you have to understand, they have to know in their heart that even when awful things happen, you know, we're there for the right reasons. My leadership is sound. I'm not a bad person. You know, otherwise they become victimized by that thing. And substance abuse and all those other things compounded.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough, and everybody deals with it their own way. And, you know, I always heard that, oh, there's a stigma. If you seek out mental health, you know, people will push down. And that, I'll be honest, that's not something I ever really saw in my time. And I remember coming back from Marja with 3-6 in 2011. And one of my scouts who saw most of the stuff, you know, the company he was with got into a lot of contact, and he got blown up once and stuff like that. And I remember him coming back and being like, hey Sergeant, like, I can't sleep. You know, he was almost in tears, like, there's something wrong. And I was like, let's go talk to Chief, you know, let's go to medical and talk to Chief, or do you want to talk to Chaplain, you know? And that was like my immediate response. And I remember I was a sergeant, and I told my staff sergeant, who was the battalion fire or the regimental fire chief at the time, I was like, hey, I'm taking him over here. And no one was like, no, you know, quit being a pussy. Yeah. You know, there was nothing like that. Yeah. So I think the help is out there. I think a lot of it is our own pride, and guys that may be having issues don't want to admit that, like, hey, man, you know, something might be wrong here. And, you know, that guy having the courage to come up and be like, I can't sleep. I just need to go talk to somebody. And I pass it off to the professionals and let them take it. But from there, you know, I think he did pretty well. But it's,
yeah, you know, Justin, I mean, you know, here's the deal. You had established enough rapport and trust with that young Marine or soldier that he felt like it was safe for him to come to you.
Yeah.
You know, and you had enough emotional shock absorber from your own experience that you were slightly different than him and knew what to do. And so, like, I would say, like, the chain of effectiveness was right there, right? Where we fail them is they don't trust us enough to come to us, or that middle person doesn't have the maturity or experience or will to offer a constructive outcome, and then the resources for them to go to are unknown. You know, and then any of those, that chain is broken. You get people that are out there that, and even when we do everything right, like last summer, you know, when our veterans watched what happened last summer, just awful. And because they know, they put themselves, you know, those, you know, here we are, 1 year anniversary, you know, and we all think about those Marines and sailors and soldiers, you know, who were there when that happened, and they're living with it today. And, you know, all of us understand that, you know, and it's just it's brutal.
Yeah, for sure. It was I remember an immense feeling of pride seeing the Marines running through the airport and stuff. And then, you know, it was just, I don't know. The whole thing was just crazy. You're still active duty, so I'm not going to get into the politics of it and stuff like that. I don't want to put you on the spot for anything like that. But obviously there was a lot of questions asked by veterans. There was a lot of, I don't know, there was a lot of back and forth about the whole thing. I didn't really like that the administration pushed back on the military's events. Like they put out an after action, and they were like, that's not the way it happened kind of deal. I wasn't a fan of that, but you know, it is what it is. It's the military. We do what we're supposed to do. It was just tough seeing the photos of those Marines carrying their dead, you know, friends.
Well, so let me offer, you know, obviously I'm not going to talk about the politics of this thing, but let me offer, you know, the people who may be listening later some context of things they may not know, especially if you haven't served yet, or if it's been a while since you served. Imagine this. So anybody who served in Iraq or Afghanistan, and saw the pictures of those Marines and paratroopers and what they were dealing with that throng of people so close, and the threat being a suicide bomber, it's almost an impossible task.
For sure.
Right? I mean, you know that, right? It's almost impossible. There's no standoff. You don't have the chicanes. The crowd is right on you. When we were in Iraq and Afghanistan, we would engineer our entry control points to maintain distance to give us the ability to spot threats and isolate them as far as possible. I mean, you saw it firsthand, and I know a lot of your veteran listeners did. But in that instance, imagine how close that crowd was. And then look at the Marines. The Marines were exposing themselves, and I'm saying Marines, this applies to everybody. The paratroopers who were there too. They're standing up exposed in order to do the best they can to look into the crowd to see the threats. I mean, they were taking risk to do an almost impossible task. I mean, the valor alone in that is it's hard to understand unless you're familiar with that environment. And then, after it happened, and they evacuated the wounded and removed the fallen angels. The mission didn't stop. Their brothers and sisters moved right back onto those posts and stood in the exact same spot for days. It wasn't like they called a timeout and everyone went back to their wherever they could just kind of process it. That doesn't happen that way.
No, for real. Yeah.
It doesn't, and nobody talks about that, is the valor of those, the individual valor of those, and they're processing it the whole time also. I mean, it is extraordinary. So yeah, I mean, history will judge about, senior decision makers and all those things. That's for a later date. But what we can celebrate is, or not celebrate, it's a bad word, but acknowledge, what goes into those moments in the aftermath at that 19-year-old level is extraordinary.
Yeah. Yeah, every one of those, men and women on the ground are heroes for all that. The pilots that came in and flew those crazy missions, carrying hundreds and hundreds of people out at a time. The whole situation was crazy. And I guess this is a good segue, into retention and stuff like that, and even recruiting. When people saw that had to have been tough on recruiting numbers and retention numbers, because some people are going to look at that and be like, what am I doing? This was so mismanaged. I'm getting put into a situation that I don't have a say over. As Lance Corporal Kramer, I don't have a say. It's go over there and go over there now kind of situation. But the people at the top mismanaged it to the point where it causes problems. Why would I want to be part of an organization like that? So where do you, as a senior leader, how do you kind of...
Great question. Great question. So yes, I mean, it's pretty widely known right now that we're in a different recruiting area than we've ever been in my service. I would say probably since the beginning of the all volunteer force. Some of it's generational. The millennials are kind of getting outside of the zone for initial enlistments, and now we're into Gen Z, which is every generation is different. We heard people talk so much stuff about millennials and would they fight, and all they did was go out there and earn Navy crosses, for 20 years. Yeah. So, I'm not even mildly interested in people's opinion about the potential valor and sacrifice of Gen Z. They will be different, and we must figure a way to communicate with them. But the stakeholders who are involved when a young person decides to volunteer, the parents, the teachers, the coaches, the siblings, the children, the aunts, the uncles, I think we'd be naive to think that if what they saw last summer and what happened and how that all ended in Afghanistan, we'd be naive to think that has not had an effect, right? And they get, as they get a vote on when we get people. For the currently serving force, especially this generation, because they've been through so much, they're incredibly resilient. It's fair to say, without being dramatic, I mean, everyone was wounded by that. Anybody who served or had somebody they loved that was served, it's just an awful scenario. But I do believe that what will happen is, it took us a long time after Vietnam to win the confidence of the American people. And by the time 9/11 came around, there's a waiting list to get into the Marine Corps. At one point there was a 2-year waiting list in some parts of the Marines. So the American people will respond, and it's on us to win their confidence, and everybody's got to play their position. I'm not an elected or appointed official. I'm a United States Marine, and I have a responsibility to coach, teach, mentor, develop, identify talent, and empower them beneath me, and to adjust with the times. Everyone throws, oh, so and so is woke. Okay, wait a minute. Are they woke, or are they just stretching to understand and to communicate effectively with the next generation? Mm-hmm. We took a number of social media leaders out to 29 Palms, some of your buddies, I think, Armstrong and a few other cats out there for our ITX, our CAX, our integrated training exercise. Mm-hmm. And, what they saw is what I saw when I was a second lieutenant. I watched platoons down in these awful gravel ditches, trying to get through a breach, crawling over brass that was probably from my platoon more than 3 decades ago, to solve the problem and give everything they could to close with an enemy, crawling under live machine gun fire. They're willing to do it. We just have to set the conditions where they trust us. And is that such a bad thing that we got to occasionally earn the trust of the American people? No.
Yeah.
No.